Hey out there, this is Matt Reddy, the host of the Mindful Activist podcast. This is our first live episode, and with me today is Christopher Mason. Thank you for being here today, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And why don't you introduce yourself? How would you like to introduce yourself to our vast audience?
Well, I think you just did such a comprehensive job. There really isn't much for me to add to that.
Yes, your name is Chris.
People probably have a very clear sense of who I am and what I stand for at this point.
Would you want me to introduce you like the way I would? Or you could just, how would you want it? I mean, again, we sort of talked about this in our last interview on air together, although it wasn't on this show, how you would want to be introduced to an audience of random viewers.
Yeah, I think if you just start talking about me, and then I'll interrupt as you go and fill in some of the blanks.
Okay. All right. So it is great having Chris here today. Chris is a really old friend of mine. He's very, very old, as you can see. Ages. And, yes. We met at the University of Maryland, in College Park, Maryland. And
also true.
Yes, we were both philosophy majors. And
some of us more than others, though.
Oh, are you saying between us, one of us was more the philosopher than the other? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think we were both pretty committed to the philosophy track. Yeah.
Yeah, that was absolutely.
Yeah, to the bones.
And you entered college as a philosophy major. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. I entered as a mechanical engineering major.
Right. So you're a convert.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we became bosom buddies in college, and we explored life and went through school. During that 1 year at University of Maryland, and then the next year back at the University of Bristol, where there was an exchange program, and you were doing your final year, and I did my third year of college there. And
we had adventures together.
Had many
glorious adventures.
Many adventures. And
exploring the dark underbelly of Bristol.
Yeah. Yeah. And we traveled around Europe and down to the Keys together. And then eventually, both graduated and sort of like went off in our different ways for many years. And you lived in a community, and eventually you became a police officer in a small town in Vermont.
I did, yes.
And you have your own TV show, local access TV show, just like Wayne's World.
Right. Very similar. It's modeled on Wayne's World, actually. That's what I based it on.
Yeah.
Called Middlebury Five-0.
Yes.
I guess I left my hippie days behind me, cut my hair, gave up my career as a professional artist, and moved to Vermont and became a police officer.
Yeah. And how's that going for you?
It's going great. I'm loving it. Wonderful. I love being a police officer.
Yeah. Is there a lot of violent crime in the small town where you live?
There's really very little crime at all. So I would say almost no violent crime, a little bit here and there, but very, very tiny amount. And crime in general, with a very, very low rate of crime. Middlebury is a very small town. There's about 6,500 people in Middlebury.
Well, there's only one question that I've considered standard for this show. So
this could be a very brief interview.
Well, that question, it's a launching point. Depends on.
That question is, what is your favorite color?
Yes. You brought that up. Do you have a favorite color?
Oh, purple. Definitely purple.
Mine too. Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't actually know that. Okay, the question that I've asked in all previous interviews is, do you consider yourself an activist?
Sort of. I consider myself a revolutionary.
Really? Well, that's a
Yeah.
step up from activist, I would say.
Yeah, maybe so. Yep.
So why do you, can you expand on that? Why do you consider yourself a revolutionary?
I believe joy is a revolutionary act. And I'm a very joyful person. I'm very happy.
So in just pursuing joy as sort of like the purpose of your life, that's why you consider yourself revolutionary.
Absolutely.
So you're not saying in terms of social revolution of major power structures in the world. That's not a focus of yours.
No, I've very deliberately decided not to focus upon that.
And why is that?
Because I don't feel like I have the insight to be able to affect change in a reliably positive manner.
This is wild. So yeah, another person just jumped in for a second.
I heard that. So I feel like I have some ideas. I have a sense of what an enlightened political system might be, but I'm aware that it's such a complicated thing that I can't possibly have complete insight, and my notions of what constitute a positive political system may themselves be flawed. So in trying to affect change on that level, I might very well have a negative impact upon the world. So I don't feel a tremendous amount of confidence that if I dedicated myself to that, the outcome would be positive. Whereas if I dedicate myself to personal happiness, there's a lot greater chance that the impact will be positive. It's a lot more reliable.
So you're hesitant to be at all a sort of a puppet master for what goes on in the world because you don't have confidence you really know what to do, what to change so that the world would be a better place.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm not really an idealistic person in that sense.
In the sense, in what sense?
In the sense of affecting change on a macroscopic level, impacting world politics or even national politics.
Because but that's because you just don't, it's not because you don't care or do not care what happens on the macroscopic scale like that.
Well, I would say that I care, that it affects me, but things that are closer to me, things that are the more immediate, impact me far more. So I choose to focus my energies on those things. So it's a fairly abstract sense of caring. So it doesn't have the immediacy and the vigor of my tangible relationships and my connections within the community in which I live.
Yeah, it's a topic that I sort of I think about all the time. The pursuit of personal happiness in our sort of the microcosm of our individual life versus pursuing anything to do with trying to make the world a better place. Because they really are, they're very different spheres of life. And I've been spending a lot of time over the last 3 years, more than I ever have before in my life, sort of like spent a lot of energy focused on trying to think, how can we change the world in a way to make it much better. And it takes a lot of attention away from, it can take a lot of attention away from your personal joy, personal happiness, to focus on such big things. And a large part of myself, I don't feel like my personal happiness is tied to the state of the world. I don't have much problem separating those two things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems to me so often idealism is rendered ironic through politics.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
So when there's a passionate, fairly rigid sense of how things should be, and a country, a group of people works towards that end, and they're successful, it seems that often the consequences are in many ways the opposite of what they were ostensibly struggling to achieve.
Yeah.
So there'll be a struggle for freedom and liberty, and the consequences will be oppression.
Yeah.
Some very violent form of cleansing, brutality.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on the people that make big efforts to try to lead movements to really change their countries over the course of history, they get caught up in the power they gain through trying to change their country, change the state of things. And then I think they just sort of get addicted to having the power over what decisions are made about resources and situations, and they don't, and maybe also they just didn't, no one's ever really known how to implement a government that was not prone to oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's just never really been, no one's really never, Socrates, he had the theory of or Plato had the theory of the philosopher king, the idea we just need to put in power an incredibly wise person or people. That's the solution.
Sure.
It never has seemed to work. It's just not the way power works.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I think idealism itself is toxic.
Idealism is toxic?
Yes. The notion that you absolutely know what is right, what is fundamentally correct, and that fused with the desire to impose it upon the world, I think it is a toxic thing.
Yeah, there's nothing, I mean, there's lots of self-righteous people in the world, but activists, very self-righteous in their idealism. And I think it can really hold up activists from working together, because they're very fixated on their own ideas of what is right and what is best and what is most important. I encountered that a ton in the Occupy movement while facilitating, general assemblies. It's a lot of people with a good heart. Everyone basically knows they want to reduce oppression in the world and make things more fair, but people have different priorities, and it's very tricky facilitating and helping groups like that come together so they can make any sort of action that's productive.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the big problems is that our model, the framework that we have for making sense of of issues and political systems even is very, it works upon a polarized model, an adversarial model. So typically you have two competing systems of thought, of politics, whatever it might be, and they're struggling together for ascendancy. And that model is fundamentally oppressive, where one has power over the other. So often when there's a movement for social change, it accepts that model in some sense. So the struggle is to combat oppression, but the goal is to, in a sense, become the oppressor. And I don't think it's stated in those terms. I don't, this is a massive reduction. But I think when people approach an issue or a struggle, whatever it might be, it's perceived on some level in those terms, because those are the mental frameworks that we've inherited from the Enlightenment, pretty much from our modernist mode of thought. So it's one or the other. There's a dichotomy there. And even if you replace the power, the structure goes unchallenged. The fundamental structure goes unchallenged. It's hard to perceive. It's hard to even conceive of a struggle that doesn't, in some sense, follow that model, that doesn't accept that framework on some level, because it's just so pervasive. It's so ubiquitous.
Well, and we've talked about this a bit before, because you're one of the few people that I've talked at length with about the project that I'm working on here, that this podcast really only exists to help sort of support that project, the Global Consensus Project.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about that, and then I'll get your feedback on your thoughts on its potential or lack thereof, or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
So one thing I'm learning, which I guess you probably are well aware of, when you are the host, it is very tricky to be focused on the conversation and also pay attention to other stuff, like any other stuff about the show.
Absolutely.
Technical stuff. I mean, oh man, I do not have enough brain power. So, I mean, we actually have had a few people watching, and they've sent me a few messages.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they're watching anymore, but a couple people at least gave it a shot and watched. So.
That's because you ignored them.
Well, the way this is supposed to work, let me at least, this is my theory of how these shows, at least some shows, are going to work. So this is not intended to be just you and me, or me and one or two people having a conversation and that being the show. That could be one type of show, but the more exciting form of the show that I am, all this technical setup is for potentially a audio video experience that could potentially have hundreds of thousands of people participating.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, technically I have it set up right now. This could scale to 1,000 people. It would need, and the way it would do that, I don't know, should I explain that? I don't know if you really care. If there was some geeks watching, but it could do it video-wise, because we're using this Zoom software. Now this room, the Zoom chat software that we're using, we have a free account, and anyone can create a free account. And with a free account, you can host a video conference like this with up to 50 people. And I actually shared the link on Twitter and on Facebook. And so that's why people have been dropping in. technically up to 50 people could be in this video conference. And so that's one way that this scales up, is just now, but there's limits to what you can do with a bunch of people on video. There's a limits to how well you can really communicate with that group of people. And so the global consensus project that I've been working on is, how do you scale up so that you have an egalitarian meeting where everyone participating is as equal as possible? How do you scale that up beyond 20 or 30 people? Because as a consensus facilitator can do pretty well with 20 to 30 people facilitating a very egalitarian consensus meeting, but it doesn't really go above that. And so this Zoom software is just sort of the one it's the audio video sort of tool we could use to support that. But the software that I've designed at the Global Consensus Project is made to give a more meaningful way, or to give a viable way to interact with thousands of people at once. So we could potentially be speaking to them, and the mass of people could be responding to us. And why don't I go? I know I've shown this to you before, but I'm going to share my screen and show it a little bit too. And I don't know how well you'll be able to see it. So we'll see. Because you're on an iPhone, you don't have a desktop. So we're going to see how well you can follow this. All right. Yeah. And I won't do this too long.
Mm-hmm. Just let me know if you want me to just start talking.
Well, are you, sorry. Well, let's see. Do you feel like you know enough about the project to comment on it as I'm pulling it up?
Well, probably not, but that doesn't necessarily deter me from.
Sorry again. All right, that won't happen again. Let's see, did that work? All right. Are you seeing it? Are you seeing screen?
Sure. Yep. I can see a screen.
All right.
There's lots of information on it, but it's way too small for me to read.
Right. Maybe you'll get the gist of what they're looking at here. And let me see.
Did you just start playing the banjo?
No. No, I'm having the darn technical thing again, because it's like there's what you're seeing and there is what I gotta change this. Stop sharing screen. I did the wrong screen. In order to keep our YouTube audience involved, I have to share a different screen.
Okay.
Otherwise, they are left out, even though there is no YouTube audience.
Right.
All right. So basically what we're looking at is, in theory, if we could be doing this show, and if our goal was to facilitate a conversation between us and a massive audience of any size, they could be using this interface, which I designed to interact with us.
Sure.
And let's go in here. So in theory, in theory, we could, any number of people could be logged in here, and we could set the topic of the conversation, and that's in this window over here on the left. You set the topic, and that's this topic right now is Unleash the Fury, but not really much of a conversation topic. But
that's the topic of this conversation, is Unleash the Fury.
That's of this one on the screen.
Oh, okay.
So the way the software is sort of designed, it's sort of like topics are nodes in a network, and they're sort of threaded. Let me see if I can bring one that'll make more sense. So I'm going into the Mindful Activist node, and the first topic in there is Ask Me Anything, which is just for the Mindful Activist podcast. Anyone can ask any question. And so I don't know if are you able to see this at all on your little iPhone?
I can see it, but it's way too small for me to read it.
Okay.
So
but you
I can see the general structure of it.
And that's fine. For now, that's really, that works. And so imagine if there were a ton of people in here, they could be posting questions, and the questions you post down here, or like, who is this guy? People could post questions, or these could be responses to a question, and people can vote up and down these in real time. And we'd be able to see that as that's one sort of way that this mob of viewers could be interacting. They could be making statements and voting up statements. And that'd be one sort of reflection. Oh, your free meeting will end in 10 minutes. Upgrade to a paid account. All right, that's something I got to keep in mind. They have a 40-minute limit to these. Stay with free. So we might have to stop the meeting and restart it.
Okay.
And then I'll just finish the little tour of the interface as it is now. And then while we are speaking, our video could be here in the middle screen. And then people can sparkle up, sparkle down, and raise their hand down here. There's a chat window for just the masses of people to just sort of to be able to chat about things that aren't specifically tied to the focus topic. And then down here in the right is this is a place for video responses. So if people actually are capable of it, and it's not that tricky, they can actually record a video of what they have to say and upload it to YouTube. They could actually paste the video response here. And again, thousands of people could do that simultaneously, and you can vote up and down video responses. So that would be another way for us to sort of get from a mass of people, see what video responses they find most interesting. So, and anyways, I mean, it probably sounds a little bit chaotic, but all of this is to sort of replicate the amount of power that you have when you have face-to-face with people. They have a certain ability to do stuff, to interact, and to express themselves. So I'm trying to give people a way to express themselves, and whoever's facilitating a meaningful way to understand what the masses of people participating are actually thinking, so they can help shape the discussion and move the people to making decisions they want to make. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
Really?
For sure.
All right. I'm going to have to practice that, Okay, so... All right, so we got this 7-minute countdown on the timer.
Okay.
This is the free session. We could just stop the meeting and restart it. I don't think there's any problem with that. So you game to do that?
Sure.
All
that
right.
Works for me.
All right, so I'm going to send you a new link. I'm going to stop this meeting and send a new link. All right?
Okay. Sure. is global. We went we went through a massive series of changes. Enlightenment, you're moving away from a hierarchical feudal system of government in the West, in Europe principally, and that involved changes on a lot of different levels. There were a lot of different facets to that. So some of them were political. Some were epistemological, changes in science, in how we think about the world. There were political changes, medical changes, economic changes, the move to capitalism. So it was a complete revolution in how society is structured, and how we think about the world. And I think that we're experiencing a revolution that in many respects is similar to that, has the same kind of scope and magnitude as that. A postmodern revolution in how we think, how we communicate, and in how structures exist. I think we're a little behind. I mean, there's going to be some catching up in terms of political stuff, because those frameworks are a little more monolithic. There's a lot more structure there. But in terms of how people think, how people perceive themselves, their sense of identity, we're moving away from the individualism of the Enlightenment more towards, I think, a communitarian model. And people are more and more starting to think of themselves as global citizens as well. And I think a large part of that are these revolutions within communications, how we connect with people. So, sure, we still have relationships with the people around us. We still are connected intimately with family members. So that clan system, if you like, is still a part of who we are for the most part. And we exist within communities. We have work communities and such. But a lot of the communication that we do, a lot of the connection that we're experiencing now is broader than that. And I think it's tremendously exciting. So in that sense, I think there's massive potential for change, and at an astoundingly fundamental level. So it's not just a shift in who has the power, it's a shift in our very conception of power and the nature of power itself. So I see that taking place, and it seems to be occurring fairly rapidly. So even within the space of my lifetime, even within the last few decades, there have been massive transformations.
So what are some specific examples of where you're seeing this this new type of revolution? It's communitarian type of revolution.
So, I mean, I think just in terms of how we communicate and interact and how we think of ourselves, how our sense of personal identity, it seems far broader now. When I talk to young people in particular, I work with young people a great deal. It's very much about, their place in the world, and they perceive themselves as having a place in the world. So it's not just about the little community or the specific, job goals and ambitions and such. They're thinking about the impact that they're going to have upon the world, and what they want the world to look like. That wasn't the case when I was growing up. I mean, there were a few people who were outwardly focused like that, but I wasn't, and most of the people that I interacted with weren't. And so it seems like there's been a pretty radical shift in that respect. If you're asking me how it's changed in terms of like politically, the impact that it's had politically, I'm not. I think that it's impacted those structures a little less than it's impacted thought processes. But even in that respect, I see there's some big changes that have occurred. It's just in Bernie Sanders, his candidacy for the presidency would be a prime example of that. The idea of somebody who is explicitly a socialist running for the highest office in the USA is that's a pretty miraculous thing. That he gained this, I mean, the support that he did. I know he wasn't successful, but
he was incredibly successful. He just didn't win.
Right. Yes. Successful in the sense of winning. Yes.
Yeah.
There are many other ways to measure success, and I mean that's what I'm saying, that perceived in respect of those things, it was astounding. For somebody who grew up in the 80s, it's nothing short of miraculous.
Yeah. Yes, it's strange times. I mean, I think Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are signs of something strange in the air. This thirst for change from the populace and the disenfranchised populace who are growing to just recognize they are not in control of the two major political parties in the country. That these are these two political parties that control politics are controlled by power brokers in those parties and the networks of people that support those power brokers. And so, yeah, we're in for interesting times in the next. It'll be very interesting. I wonder if it'll like continue. If the next round of presidential elections, will we have like, will it happen again, or will we slide back into have just these mainstream establishment candidates?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that strikes me is that when I was growing up back in the 80s, going through high school and into college, relativism was a fairly fringe notion. So the idea that the ideas that we have, the views of right and wrong that we have, and true and false even. So thinking of it in epistemological terms as well as kind of moral, political terms. The notion that those ideas might not be absolutely true, or that there might not even be an absolute truth attainable within those fields, was a pretty radical notion. And it did not have a tremendous amount of mainstream support. But talking to people now, there's tremendous support for that, to the point where it is almost the accepted reality. When I talk to young people now, it's almost a given that, you leaving?
You're putting me to sleep.
But they will say, well, of course, that's just my opinion, and I know that that's my truth, that's my reality. I hear people saying that sort of thing a great deal, and the fact that has become such an established way of thinking of reality is that's pretty remarkable. Like that is a revolution right there. That notion has become so mainstream. It's been a part of philosophy for a long time through the existentialist movement and the postmodern movement, but that people generally are saying that and accepting that it's fresh and it's remarkable.
What notion? I'm serious. Like
that their ideas are relative, that they are not absolutely true. That there's an element of subjectivity.
Yeah, but it doesn't help when you're trying to facilitate this recognition of relative truth. Certainly muddies the water sometimes, and makes people it's sort of like, well, yeah, anything that muddies the water with trying to establish some sort of common truth it just makes things more challenging. And it's sort of like, it forces you to try to challenge people to be a little bit more enlightened about what is true and what they want and what they need.
It's enormously challenging. And I think in many ways it's terrifying. And I think that is what we're seeing in Trump. He's tapping into that. So Trump is not a contradiction of that. Trump is a symptom of that. I think there are a lot of people who really don't like it and really crave a simpler kind of black and white perspective. They want that to be the reality, and less and less is it the narrative of life, of modern life.
Yeah.
So, getting back to your platform, your kind of communications platform, and I see that as a part of that. It's exciting because it's kind of tapping into that. It's allowing people to communicate in a fairly fresh way, en masse.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting experiment if and when actually take an attempt at doing something with any sort of significant audience. I mean, we did do an event we had like 15 to 20 people in there, but the platform didn't do everything it does now, and it was really just sort of a technical test.
Yeah.
So I have not yet attempted to facilitate any number of people with it.
Yeah. So I know we've talked a few times actually about a metaphor, if you like, a way to symbolize what it is. And to me, I've been thinking about it a little bit, and to me, it seems very much like a mind. So the way that it functions, you're talking about it in terms of having nodes. So that image of a mind, of having these kind of areas that are getting excited, that are becoming warm, and the connections between them, and the fact that it has an organic flavor to it, that it's not, you can't just be reduced to a collection of mechanical impulses, and that the ideas within the mind are created through that interaction, through that participation of the various nodes.
I think you're right. I think the mind is definitely probably the best metaphor. I mean, as you know, I was going with the hive,
yep.
And another one that I've played around with is collective. But there is not really a great. I mean, it's like you only have what metaphors do you use for a group of people of any size in which everyone is equal, totally equal in power, and they work together in a very positive, harmonious way. I mean, there's team. I mean, you said community was one idea you threw out there. A mind. I mean, a mind is not how you refer to a group of individuals.
Right.
But I think in terms of, I think you're right in terms, I've called it the hive mind.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think one of the problems, and we talked a little bit about this, is that most of the metaphors that are out there, the associations, the images, the iconography that's out there with respect to this is embedded. It's rooted in a culture of individualism, and what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve and put together, is contrary to that. It's a contradiction of that. So all of the positive metaphors have been kind of co-opted by that culture, the culture of individualism, and all of the metaphors for collective process have been sullied. They've been tarnished. So all of the images that we have, all of the images that have been presented to us through your science fiction books and movies, and even political discourse to some extent, those communitarian ventures have been presented in this topic manner. So generally, when you think of a whole group of individuals acting harmoniously towards a common good, there's almost an element of horror movie to that, just because it's been presented in such a negative way for so long. So it's tough to find really positive associations. It's tough to find positive iconography for something like that. You almost have to create it fresh, because it's something fresh that in some sense is dramatically countercultural.
So do you think, I mean, we haven't, I haven't done much really significant promotion or networking with this. And currently, I am a little bit entrenched in the Hive, using the word Hive for what I'm doing. Because that's the domain we have, hive1.net, in addition to the globalconsensusproject.org, which is that's a big word. So do you feel like we need to pivot to a different metaphor, or can we go with Hive 1 until, I could go with Hive 1 until I build up some level of community interest and let them help pick a different one, just let the Hive pick a new name, a new word.
Sure.
Because I know you said the Hive, the Hive metaphor is, you felt it was a big turnoff, and I've had other people sort of be like turned off by it. But I need to replace it with something. I can't, if I'm going to let go of it, I have to have something, and I have to be able to get a domain that works for whatever. So if we went with Mind, Mind wouldn't be available.
Mm-hmm. The global neural net.
That's a pretty big word. Global neural.
It is.
I'm not opposed. That's not bad. I didn't want to call it human, human something, because I feel like that's a little speciesist or speciest, There will be other.
My daughter would be very upset with you.
Yeah.
Discriminating against dogs and such.
Well, I just think there could be other conscious beings, computers could become conscious, or there could be other. Mm-hmm. I was trying to stay away from human-centric language.
Right.
Sure. But what do you think? Do you think it's urgent we leave the Hive metaphor?
Well, I think Hive has some positive associations. I think it maybe requires a little bit of rebranding. So not necessarily rejecting Hive, but just being conscious moving forward of some of the associations that people will have with it. But I don't think there is a good alternative. That's the problem, is you're having to create it. So maybe you're the person that creates the association, or not you, but what it is you're doing, what it is you're a part of.
And if we, if a Hive, we'll go with the Hive word. So say there is a Hive, a human Hive that is created that is not an oppressive Hive. It's a collective of conscious beings in which you are able to, when you participate in it, you're fully able to express yourself in whatever manner you see fit. Yet you are able to tap into this mass collective of conscious beings and work together in really interesting, creative ways. And I have a number, I guess my question was going to be, does that pique your interest as to something that you would be interested in participating in or connecting to? And I think without, I'm not sure you can, it's easy to answer that without more specific sort of examples of what types of experiences you could have participating in this. Because I think there's a huge spectrum of things you could be doing, like collaborative storytelling is one. I think there's a lot of fun, just blatantly fun things you could be doing. Like we learned from social media, there's lots of fun things you could do with social media. We could play games, we could write stories, and we could do that in this Hive platform. I mean, ultimately, my hope is that we learn how to use it to control our collective power in interesting ways. But I'm also sort of like brainstorming just like things that would draw people in to just experience it and test it and learn about it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, I think that, there's a sense in which I don't really need the specifics. When I think of communication, that there are a lot of pragmatic motives for engaging in communication. That there's a lot of things that we try to accomplish in a tangible sense through communication, and emotion as well. But one of the most basic things that we do through communication is connect with people. It's a form of relationship, and any communication, kind of face-to-face, in-person communication, is a form of relationship. And it might be abusive, but assuming that it's not abusive, that it's not oppressive in some way, then it is the most kind of raw, fundamental way in which we kind of connect with people, along with kind of physical touch. And it's far more commonplace than that. There aren't that many people that we physically interact with, but there are a lot of people that we communicate. So when we communicate with people, it's an expansion of who we are. We're making a part of who we are visible to somebody else, and they're making a part of themselves visible to us. So there's an exchange of personhood that is taking place there, and an expansion of both the people that are involved in that process. So it's an incredibly powerful and impactful and potentially very beautiful thing, communication. And the notion that could be expanded and that we could do that en masse with a massive quantity of people is tremendously exciting. And it's sort of fresh territory in a way, because for so long communication has been about person to person, looking at the body language, assessing all those subtle cues, the inflection, and it's been the model, the kind of iconic model is one-on-one communication, and it's trying to capture some aspects of that, kind of the essence of that, but with an entirely new model. So it's challenging and it's exciting. And if it can do that, if it is successful in doing that, then that's wonderful. So how people use it in a sense is, sure, it's relevant and will to some extent inform how excited I get about participating in it. But there's a sense in which just structurally it's attractive, just in terms of what it may offer.
Awesome. It's so refreshing to hear positive feedback about the concept. It's amazing how much negative feedback you can get when you share ideas, especially like really outside the box ideas with people. And there's something about the internet. There's something about sharing ideas on the internet that I think has changed the nature of what it's like to be a human. It's like, it's like, back in the day, you would you had a crazy idea, you'd be sharing it face to face with people. And you would get face to face feedback, which would be But when you're face to face with someone, there's things that prevent you from really, really being a jerk and really ripping apart a person's idea. But even then, but the internet takes it to a whole new level. Not only it takes away some of that face to face, but there's an anonymity on the internet, and so it's just like the dark side of humanity when you share, like you put a video on YouTube or you share something. It's like any joke that could be made, no matter how inappropriate, there'll be someone out there who will make the joke, even if it's really rude or off color, if they are under the shield of anonymity. So it's like, anyways, a bit of a tangent to what you're saying. That's basically just saying thank you for.
No, I don't think it's really a tangent. I think it's rooted in a lot of the same issues that it's such a sudden thing. This revolution in communication and how we communicate. You working with young people again, a great deal of who they are, their personal identity and their relationships is electronically mediated, and there's a lot of criticism of that. I mean, particularly from older people in my generation, people are very dismissive of it. They go, they don't have the communication skills. They're not gaining those communication skills. It's so shallow. It's no substitute for actual kind of physical communication. And I don't think that's the case. I think that there is a richness to it and a potential to it that is not generally appreciated by these people who critique it. But it's hard. There are all sorts of challenges connected to it. That anonymity being one. How we apply it. How do we not be mean to each other when we're interacting from behind that veil? How do we send the subtle cues? How do we substitute for those physical cues that we're usually getting when we're interacting physically? How do we do that without the physicality? And we're working that out. It's a process. So there's definitely some painful aspects to it, and people are just vicious online in ways that they wouldn't be. Personally. But I think that's the nature of it, and it's evolving. And we'll figure that out. But then technology will evolve, and we'll be faced with fresh challenges. But the idea that it should just be forgotten, be eliminated, and we should not explore it because there are these challenges just seems like the most rank form of cowardice and narrow-sightedness imaginable.
Yeah. It's unusual for an old person like yourself to be so open-minded about the digital generation and people glued to their smartphones. That's not the normal thing that's expressed by a person as yourself.
I think there's an amazing untapped potential there. I think that every grandparent should get a Snapchat account. And that would be a phenomenal way for grandparents to keep in touch with their grandchildren.
Oh yeah,
and very, very effective. So there's amazing power there if we would embrace it, and potential for intimacy and connection, if only we would embrace it.
Yeah. There's one situation. So you sparked two different threads that I could have pursued, but I'm letting them both go.
Kind of a two parts in the forest kind of a situation.
Yeah, and I literally I'm letting.
It took neither.
It took neither. I mean, they're both interesting-ish, but I'm trying to be
generous.
I'm just not. It's part of my attempt to be a more mindful communicator. Is just because I have a thought that I could say that is interesting, I'm not necessarily going to say it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to be selective and careful. I guess so let me share with you like one thing I sort of envision that could happen. It's a bit of a tangent again. Or not. Where do I go into that? I guess this is why when you start, this is why people have plans when they go into shows. They have a plan of what you want to talk about, so you feel like you've accomplished.
So they have questions. The person that they're interviewing.
Yep. Well, you and we've just been good at winging it, but those were two situations where you were the interviewer, so you kind of owned the stage, so the weight of responsibility was on your shoulders. Here, it's like there's a shift of weight onto me, in addition to the ridiculous amount of technical stuff that I've put on top of doing for this show. Wow. So, okay. So would you be interested in sort of co-hosting an attempted facilitation of an audience? Some sort of that thing was made to be interactive with the audience, trying to get people to use the Hive software platform to communicate with us. Would you be interested in doing something like that?
Sure. Yeah. I think that would be exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a number of ideas that could be really interesting and fun, and part of it is, attracting. You have to attract people to the event. It's like, so we could I could run a few of those ideas by you. In fact, we could use the Hive software where I could list the different ideas, and I don't know if I showed you this part, but they are threaded. So you actually, once you have an idea listed, you can click on it and go into that idea and then explore that further. Kind of like a mind map. You ever seen a mind map that's threaded like that? So that's how the nodes in the platform work. So it's each idea can go to more ideas, and so we could attempt to use that, or we could just talk and brainstorm ideas.
Sure.
And then at some point I have to bite the bullet and actually say we're going to have a show or an event, and I have to invite or promote it to actually try to get a number of people in there using it. I have this hesitance to use my friend network. It's like I'd rather have 100 of people that I don't know from around the world or something in there, and sort of get it cranking before friends drop in. Because does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
All right. All right. Well, we've been going. We're at an hour and 18, and so I'll probably edit this down to 15 minutes of quality content now.
The nuggets.
The nuggets. But this is great. I really, I don't know if this was great because so much was relying on me. But this is our third actual recorded episode interview that we've done together, over the last several years. And I haven't actually watched the first one ever. I don't think I have a recording of that, and it's not still online.
I can find it for you.
Yeah, I think if you could put that online or just send it to me or something, I'll put it online. That would be fun. And so thank you so much. We'll wrap it up here, if that's all right with you. Christopher Mason. You are very, very generous in putting up with the technical difficulties of this, and you are always an interesting person to talk to. I feel like we can go to pretty much in so many different directions. It's a bit overwhelming, the different topics we could go into. But thank you so much, and your feedback has been very helpful on this project. Definitely going to enlist your help for future episodes and events. Is there anything you want to say to the world? Do you have any like website or Twitter accounts or anything that you like to share out there for the vast audience to hear about? Is there anything like that?
No, nothing exactly like that. No blog or presence in that respect. I mean, I have the shows, the interviews, but they mostly have a local flavor. So I'm not sure they would be that compelling for a general audience outside of Middlebury. I have an Officer Mason Facebook page, a Twitter account.
All right. So if people find you fascinating, Officer Mason on Twitter and Facebook, yes. And Middlebury 5-0 is the show, the cable access show.
That's right.
All right.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on as your inaugural guest.
Yes. Well, inaugural live shared guest. Yes. I've done a few interviews, but haven't shared them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And everyone out there, thank you for watching. And feel free to visit theglobalconsensusproject.org or hive1.net to learn more about what the project behind this podcast. So we'll call that's a cut officially from the show. And nobody is watching anything that we're doing. So so we can just talk. It is so weird trying to talk when you're aware of the potential pressure of other eyes listening to us.
Yeah.
How much does that affect you?
It's definitely, it's an acquired skill. It's a little bit like, when you're reading out loud. I don't know if you've done a lot of reading out loud, but I read to Jennifer and Claire quite a bit. But you don't read the part that you're focusing on. You focus on the words that are, a sentence or two ahead. So you're reading the words that are coming out of your mouth are what you remember reading a little while before. And that's how you avoid screwing it up. If you're doing that, you're looking at the grammar that's coming up ahead, so you modulate your speech. You know that it's building towards a question, so your intonation is correct. So you're always, your mind is focused ahead of what's coming out of your mouth. And interviewing somebody is a little bit like that. Like actually listening to the person speaking and you're processing what they're speaking, your mind is not really focusing on that. It's moving towards framing questions and moving the conversation in different directions. And so it's kind of an art of, you've got to have one part focused very much on the moment and what's happening, but there's another part of you that is actively kind of planning and thinking about kind of what's coming up next. And it can be very challenging to do that. And it's a simultaneous kind of a thing.
It's interesting. It's a totally different mental skill than facilitating a group.
Oh yeah.
And so so in a way, it's quite a challenge to set myself up to think of trying to combine the two, of being like interacting and facilitating a mass audience while also interviewing someone or having a conversation with someone. That might not be the best thing to try to do. It might be it might be better to make the event a facilitating the audience event. And so, and even if you're here with me, you're co-facilitating. So we are not thinking about what we're saying to each other. We're both focused on the audience, and we're not talking to each other. We're talking to the audience, and we're seeing what they say and seeing their reactions, and asking questions, and we're asking questions of them. And maybe we're taking, using this software or using just YouTube, we could actually let them share video and talk to us.
Right. Yeah, having a conversation, typically, like if you sit down and you actually have a conversation with someone face to face, that's typically something that engages almost the entirety of yourself.
Well, if you're present,
you are pouring yourself into that interaction. So, there are distractions. There's things going on, and you may, your mind may wander, and you start thinking about the dishes you have to wash or some obligation at work or something like that. But a huge amount of who you are is focused upon interacting with that person. It's very consuming. So having a conversation with someone that has the appearance of that, like you're fully engaged, but structurally there's a whole part of you that is not, that is focused upon something else entirely that's going on, simultaneously or is going to be happening in the future, it's very difficult. It's not what conversation usually is. It's something entirely different. So I think you're right that if just having an interviewing someone just in itself, like in the studio, that is challenging. That is really difficult to do effectively so that it looks like a good conversation. It has the feel of a conversation. Right? But your situation where you're trying to do that, you're trying to interview someone and use all those skills where you're thinking ahead to what questions you're going to be asked and monitoring the way the conversation is evolving. But you're doing all of that, you're trying to do all of that I did in the studio. But on top of that, you're also in control. You're doing all the production as well. So that's like adding everything that Jennifer was doing into the mix and putting that on your shoulders. And the technical stuff that you're doing actually involves kind of feedback potentially from other people that are out there. So it's, in a sense, it's way more complex than what Jennifer's doing. That may be a little too much for one mind to be able to process all at once. And what's probably going to happen is that you're just not going to be able to very effectively interview people because you have all this other stuff that is intruding and not allowing you to focus on the conversation or focus on where you want to take the conversation.
Yeah. If I had nothing to do with any sort of technical thing or audience, and I was just interviewing, that would be a challenging task for me to do that well.
Right. It is.
Yeah.
But if I had to do Jennifer's job at the same time as doing what I do in the studio, not that I'm, like a star interviewer or anything like that, but it would be completely chaotic. There really wouldn't be a show. It would be so choppy. It wouldn't do justice to my guests. So it just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you need to rethink the interview format or rethink production. Like either you need to find some way to take you out of the production or some way to not be interviewing somebody while that process is going on. Either way, I think would work, but it's too much probably.
Well, that is one of the ideas. That's one of the ideas that I've definitely played with is take me out of the interviewer role and have someone else be the host. And it could be rotating guest hosts, or it could be a panel. It'd be very easy to use software like this to make a panel of 4 or 5 people even, And just have, I mean, also if I make it 4 or 5 people and I'm not like the facilitator, I could potentially be the technical, I'd be doing all the technical stuff, but I'm not in charge of the conversation. You know, the
Right.
silence that happens is not now demand me to do something about it, you know?
Sure.
But even just taking me off camera and I would be really focused on the audience and seeing, but I mean, a show has a different purpose than some of the stuff I want to do with the Hive software. I mean, the interacting, facilitating the audience, that's a different type of event. And so
Right.
it could be, I just need to like actually try to do some of the types of events that I designed the software for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about the Hive thing, but even just interacting with YouTube and having the potential there for people to give feedback as the show is being broadcast, or potentially join the conversation. It's hard to imagine you being able to process that and coordinate that in a way that was really smooth and seamless. Like it's always going to be a little bit choppy.
Yeah.
I know I wouldn't be able to do it. I would not be able to juggle all those things simultaneously. Maybe there are people out there who have those skills, but that's not me. And maybe you would acquire those skills if you did it a lot. Maybe you get better and better at it, and eventually it would be really smooth and seamless.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this was a pretty crazy experiment. I mean, even just the fact that I made this an open room and shared it, and we had that random guy drop in, you know, it's like we're talking in a public space and anyone could pop in. And I think actually twice people popped in on us.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then that was kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was really helpful for, it was funny.
Yeah. Yeah. They left pretty quick. I wonder if it was even intentional, if they kind of knew what they were doing, or
I think maybe I would expect the guy that dropped in wasn't hoping to be like the third person. If he was like the 15th person, then he would have like slipped in and, you know, but when he saw, wait, I'm a third wheel here. He's like,
yeah.
And we weren't.
Yeah. Probably just wanted to take just an anonymous kind of little glimpse.
Yeah. And that's kind of some of the beauty of what you can do with this Zoom software. It's like creating these audio video rooms, and people could be dropping in and out and going from conversation to conversation.
Right.
It's pretty powerful stuff.
Yep.
Could be really interesting.
So I gotta get ready for work.
All right. Thank you so much.
Gonna get some lunch and clean up.
Great talking to you, even though most of it was under the stranglehold of the interview situation.
That's fun. Anytime.
All right.
Yeah. If you have, if there's a time where you have like a bunch of specific topics, I can weigh in on that too. You know, it can be a little more, a little less broad as well. I'm open to that.
Oh yeah. I think I'll do more planning and have a direction for it to go, especially if I'm going to still be the technical everything. That would help. I think so. My next question is this. Now talk while I do all this stuff.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Love you too. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.